Michael-Jay, we got Greg on the line. What do you want to ask him?
How did you vet your partner?
Yeah, we have had some joint ventures and syndications, and there have been a couple of partnerships that didn't go as well as we would have liked, and we had to break up with a couple of people. So we do take vetting people a little more seriously than we used to. It's become more of a checklist items, but even, frankly, to this day, we don't do like a formal background check or anything like that. It's more of a word of mouth. You can find out a whole lot about people just on social media, not only about maybe what they're doing business wise, but I need to get along with this person for years. Are we going to match up in a very basic way?
I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different than everything else out there. I bring together a new and an experienced investor on each episode, and I let the aspiring investor ask the questions that they need answered. So if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably will have the exact same questions. Now, before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and that little bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe, and very excited for today's show. We've got two great guys on the line with us today, two people that I see very frequently on our Friday TGIF networking call. So very familiar faces here. We got Greg Scully as our experienced apartment investor and Michael-Jay Freer as our aspiring investor today. So gentlemen, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Brian. Good to see you. Good to see you again, Michael-Jay.
So going to be fun today. Greg, we're going to talk about you first. And that said, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Greg Scully. We syndicate RV parks and apartments with a focus on central and eastern Tennessee and the Carolinas. We also have a small property management company for a portion of our apartment portfolio, and some other prior experiences flipping houses in the Knoxville and the Tri-Cities area.
So how long have you been in the real estate field in general?
We've been full-time, pushing 4 years, got started around 2016. At that point, we were living back in Alaska. I was doing W-2 work 20 years for Frito-Lay. We got kind of the entrepreneurial bug, had a small women's clothing store that did not pan out the way we wanted to, and kind of simultaneously looked for another entrepreneurial avenue and went to a Than Merrill Flip This House one-day conference, and that was the beginning of the rabbit hole.
Nice. And then, so you went to a flipping conference first. Did you guys start by flipping? And one thing I want to clarify, you say I assume you're talking about your wife. Is that correct?
Yeah, my main business partner is my wife, Kim.
Yep. Awesome.
So yeah, I went full time before she did. We did all kinds of financial ninja tricks to free up capital, change jobs. She was a stay-at-home parent for most of our children's lives. Ultimately, as I went full time, she got a W-2. So we finagled through some of that for a couple of years until we finally landed here in Tennessee.
Nice. So how did the progression go from flipping to syndicating RVs and apartments?
We got started in education platforms. So we did not start flipping houses. We joined an apartment education platform. Ultimately, I went through 2 of those. Being in Alaska, we decided that we were not going to invest in our own market. Objectively, Anchorage, Alaska might not be the best market, especially when you compare it to some others. So we knew we were going to be investing out of state. So I focused on the underwriting side of it because I figured that would be something that I can do remotely.
Now, Anchorage is beautiful, by the way, but I think you're right. It may not be the best place to invest in apartments. But what attracted you to Tennessee?
It was the beauty of the networks that come with some of the education platforms. So, and just building relationships within the education platforms. The first deal that we were heavily involved with landed in Johnson City. It was a bit of a bear. And ultimately, Tim and I moved down to help one of our main partners get through that project successfully. And then the deals just started coming in Tennessee. At some point, you learn the market. you get
Yep.
comfortable because you can make decisions faster. So that's how we ended up here. And we knew we were leaving Alaska at some point anyway. It had been
Yep.
40 plus years for me. Kim was born there. So we were moving somewhere,
Yep.
and we're in Tennessee right now.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, speaking of where you're at right now, you are at one of your apartments right now,
Yeah,
correct?
right. Very authentically, I am in one of our vacant apartments
Huh?
because we are property managers for about 65 of our units over 2 properties.
Mhm.
Came up for a maintenance tech interview that was a no-show. So
Mhm.
there you go.
Nice, nice. And if I can recall, I think this is the second time I've interviewed a podcast guest. It's actually in one of the apartments that they own and operate. So second timer, second timer. The first one was a guy who actually lived at the apartment that he managed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, bought the apartment and there was a vacant unit and he moved in. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's gives you some really good hands-on information on what's going on, but
Yeah,
um,
maybe too much.
yeah, may be too much, exactly. But so let's talk about, you say you're self-managing 65 units. Number one, a lot of people move towards third-party management. Why did you guys choose to manage it?
We started with third-party management, and we operate largely in tertiary markets. So there's a limited number of vendors to choose from, and we weren't particularly happy
Yeah.
with the management that we had. I will qualify that a little bit. I have a much greater respect for what they did for us than I did when before we started self-managing.
Yep.
So we decided we would take it on with the hopes that we would be able to scale to a point where we would get more vertically integrated,
Hmm.
and then a little pandemic happened and
Hmm.
interest rates went up and we never quite got to the scale. So we're still hanging in there though.
Yeah. Do you regret making that move and managing the own apartments
No,
or not?
not at all. It is a huge time suck. Ultimately, you will be better operators for it.
Hmm.
So I am a big fan of getting in and mucking about and,
Hmm.
learning all the details. And we sure know a lot more than we used to. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that I think, I mean, with the management, I mean, you mentioned something, you weren't getting the management that you thought you wanted or thought you were going to get. And then when you started doing yourself, realize all the other things. I felt that way a lot with property management companies. And we've switched them around several times. And it seems like you never get a perfect property manager. But I mean, makes sense, right? I don't think there's a perfect property manager out there. But on my side, I think we've leaned towards, you know, if you have a good relationship and they're doing the basics well enough, we've typically kind of filled in the gaps where property management companies might be weak in some things. But anyway, yeah, there's lots of people, especially people who own apartments, that complain about the property managers. But yeah, there's not a perfect one out there. So, well, cool. Let's switch gears and let's talk specifically about one of the properties that you guys have done. So, pick your first and pick or your favorite, or I don't know, maybe the one you're standing in right now, and tell us a little bit about it.
I'll switch it up a little bit if you don't
Yeah,
mind. I was thinking what I would talk about is
perfectly fine.
our movement towards RV parks
Okay.
and just like taking on a different asset class. And it
Yeah.
was just kind of an interesting thing. Some of our RV parks are outside of Knoxville, where Dollywood, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, major tourist stuff. Just kind of that recognition of other opportunities in your market without having to switch markets. It was an interesting transition to say, okay, we don't have to completely reinvent the wheel from a market research aspect. We will have to do some things different from an underwriting perspective for this asset class. But it was a nice exercise in a way of like, okay, well, let's rinse and repeat some of the information we already have and just shoot it at a different asset class.
Yeah. What do you like about the RV asset class?
There seems to be a little, we haven't gone full cycle on anything. So that's one of my things. I don't really gauge the success of a property until you don't own it anymore. But both of them that we're involved in, like five, two of them that we're very involved with basically on a daily basis, although we do have full-time managers. They tend to throw off more cash flow. So more of an emphasis from the underwriting side is higher cash on cash returns And there seems to be more opportunity just on the acquisition side because I won't say it's a little less sophisticated from the brokerage point of view. There's more opportunity for mom and pop owners.
Yep.
Seller financing, things like that. So it's been a little bit easier on the buy side to find something that works.
Yeah. Yeah, we are having a hard time on the buy side on multifamily, and I think a lot of multifamily owners are a lot less or a lot more reluctant, less likely to do the seller financing. And we've actually put a lot of seller financing offers out there. Here's typically what we've been doing is here's the price we can pay with conventional financing, and most owners are going to look at that and say, we can't do that. And then we'll follow it up with, if you're willing to finance a portion of it or all of it, here's what we can do then. And it's gotten us a lot more traction. But I think you're right. I think most RV park owners are probably going to be more likely to entertain offers like that. So, all right. Well, next question. And, this is one I ask everybody. It's about your why you're doing this and what your motivation is. So Greg, what's your big burning why?
It's really just the optionality that comes with self-employment, generally speaking. Last week we were on quote unquote vacation, was able to travel to the West Coast, spend some time with family. We were still working, but we have gotten into businesses where our day-to-day presence isn't absolutely required. That's a little bit tougher when you're doing property management. We do have a third partner, Darren Light, great guy, great partner. So, when in our absence, he was filling in all the either physically roles, but it was really just that optionality to, you hear it all the time, live where you want, invest where it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is nice to be able, and now you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of positive things to living in the market that you're in. You're able to move faster. You're able to really get to know the areas, but on the flip side, you're not anchored there. I mean, you don't have to physically be there for a lot of stuff. So live where you want, invest where it makes sense. I like that. All right. Last question. What's coming up next for you guys?
We're focusing on trying to co-sponsor larger syndication deals. Myself and Kim specifically, we feel we have a very good track record on the asset management side, underwriting and due diligence, and frankly, property management. So in the apartment space, we've been in this 30 to 68 unit type space. The property management experience has just been screaming scale, scale, scale at us. So we're looking to partner with on larger syndications and not necessarily in the Tennessee market for some of the reasons we already talked about. We can do asset management and acquisition and due diligence from pretty much anywhere. I will qualify though, back to that boots on the ground thing. It is like extremely important to me, that somebody on the team is in the market or is it within a couple hours that can definitely be that true boots on the ground, can be on property and knows the market very well. Somebody's got to play that role.
Yeah. And that's, when I started the new company, just recently, that's one thing that I was really thinking about is, what's the benefit of having local people? And so started looking specifically for local people for acquisitions and for asset management. I'm a 2-hour drive away from the market, which I can get down there in a pinch. It makes for a long day, but yeah, I think somebody has to be close, but not everybody. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and bring Michael-Jay on. So Michael-Jay, how's it going today?
Very good. Just dropped my son off at college for his sophomore year.
Nice. And where's your son going?
Florida Polytechnic. It's a STEM school full of geeks, and he's one of those geeks.
Yeah, that's fine. I was a math nerd going through school, so I fully appreciate that. So, but awesome. And speaking of, my wife teaches at a STEM high school. And my oldest daughter that's still at home is going to be attending that one with her. So yeah, all about the geeks and nerds.
That's right. They're gonna be running the place soon.
Yeah. Well, cool. So do us a favor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my full-time job, my day job, as I say, is IT program management, which I've done for decades. I currently am running 18 parallel projects in the healthcare industry, so that keeps me quite busy. but I'm looking towards the future. And as I was, doing that one day, I read David Lindell's book, Multifamily Millions, and it seemed like more than just a get-rich-quick scheme. So I read Emerging Markets, and now this all looks very good. So from there, it was more education, more podcasts, more weekend trainings, and I haven't done my first deal yet, but I have some areas that I'm very interested in.
Nice. And what areas are you interested in?
They're South Florida. I'm in South Florida. So right now I'm looking in my backyard, and I've already been forewarned by several people in the industry that Florida is not a good market for several reasons. But, there's something to be said for starting off in your backyard, because as you guys were just talking about, you can get there and then expand from that. So the Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area is a growing area, just as Miami is. And I see some opportunities, and I want to try and take it.
I think in your backyard, I mean, there's a lot of advantages, especially with how well you know a place. I think people who live in the market they're invested in are going to have a competitive advantage compared to the people who are investing from, out of the area. I mean, you can sit down with brokers, build relationships. You can get to properties faster. You can typically churn things a little bit faster. But I mean, overall, people are going to be making money in South Florida on real estate, for a long time. So is it the best place to invest? I don't know. I mean, but I still subscribe to the idea of don't wait to buy real estate, buy real estate and wait. And I think that still holds true in South Florida. So.
Excellent.
So, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about why you were doing it and, before you read the books, but if you can go a little deeper on that subject, what's your big why for this?
So it's interesting. When I first started looking at it, I started thinking about my retirement plan and what little monies were in my 401k and my IRAs. So that was the first thing that crossed my mind. But the more I've looked into this, the more I've gotten intrigued by two things. One is how my skill set lends itself to real estate investment and maintaining the properties. But the other is legacy. I have 3 kids. I think this is something that could be passed on. I think this is something that I could bring them into. That's not to say that it would be their full-time gig. They all have their own interests, but something that they could be a part of and, pass something on. And,
I love that. The legacy investing. And it's something that, I'm setting a call up with somebody to, start that myself and, get trusts and, all that good stuff started up here soon. But the legacy, the passing on a legacy is huge. And just so happens that it's a little bit easier to do with real estate than it might be with other things. So there's an additional benefit there. But well, awesome. Well, we're gonna see what we can do in the next 20 minutes or so to help you on your journey. So, Michael-Jay, we got Greg on the line. What do you want to ask him?
So I was going to start off with multifamily, but since you were talking about your RV parks, I'm going to shift to that. So the RV parks that you're looking at or that you have, what are their sizes? How many pads are there? And are you also doing just RVs, or are you also doing long-term mobile homes? Is it like mixed use?
Yeah.
How are you doing this?
Good questions.
So I'll speak to the 2 that were very directly involved. We've been involved in some others that was largely through the acquisition process, and then a different company that's vertically integrated is running those. So the 2 that we are mucking about in, one is 55 pads, and that is completely a daily rate park. Everybody comes in, stays for 2 or 3 days, may hopefully leave with a smile on their face. The other one in North Carolina, that's actually a tiny home community. I would call it more of a tiny home resort. So that is more of like a mobile home park model, in that the people own their tiny homes and we're doing the ground lease. There's a smaller component of that park that is also daily rate. It's about 10-15% of the gross potential rents. So that is a hybrid model. And usually, it's very common to find some kind of hybrid model going on. Like in the first park I mentioned, there's also 3 cabins there. So we have a little bit of a short-term rental type thing going on there. Yeah,
Cool.
it kind of it runs the gamut. So I think that 55 pad is the smallest one that we've been involved with, and the one in North Carolina is 95.
And you have full-time management with those facilities versus your multi-family where you said you were doing the management.
Correct. Yeah, both of those have full-time on-site managers.
Now, do those
And that,
managers also live there, or
yeah,
do they come in? They live there, so they're
they
very
live
familiar.
there.
Very interesting. I see a lot of RV parks. I see a lot of mobile home communities, and now I see where they're starting to merge to some degree in some of these. I'm really amazed at the quantity I'm seeing just driving up in Florida today. It almost seems like we're on an upswing for RV parks. Obviously, they've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you see it peaking out? Do you see it then dipping down? What kind of a life cycle do you see to the RV parks?
I mean, the trend line has been fine for the past decade or so. There was a big COVID bump because people migrated to the states that were open, and a lot of those had RV parks. So there and RV sales went up quite a bit. So you're seeing a reversion kind of to the mean a little bit right now. You'll see some reports, RV sales are down, this and that is down, but they're coming down off of record highs. So you got to look at, the longer trajectory. Will it peak? I don't know. Supply and demand will play itself out in every market to some extent. I do think that things will normalize a little bit more because there is much more of a push for getting people back in the office. I'm seeing that more on my news feed, just, Facebook, this company, that company is saying, hey, you guys got to come back 2 to 3 days a week. So some of the digital nomad type stuff will probably peter off a little bit. But I do think the trend line will remain the same because there are plenty of boomers, still retiring.
Yeah.
The RVs have come a long way just in and of them themselves. I mean, they are just beautiful units that you can go see the country in and be, extremely comfortable with full size washer dryer and sometimes a nicer kitchen than I currently have.
Yeah. I'm seeing, you mentioned the boomers. I'm seeing a lot of younger guys with young kids, doing the same thing. I know several people, one of my cousins included, sold their house, bought an RV for less, and they've got a place where they stay during the school year, but when they want to take a vacation, they just unhook and start driving, and so ends up being a lifestyle that a lot of people enjoy, just because they're not tethered down to one spot, and there's no property taxes.
Yeah, right. And there's glamping. We ain't talk, that's a whole nother side to the kind of the hospitality space in and of itself. There's just like lots of things going on in that kind of experience type economy of which RV parks kind of land into. But so we see everything from the digital nomads to traveling nurses, things like that are actually pushing for more long-term stays. I do think there's still plenty of opportunity there.
Nice.
Let me ask you another question. As I said, I passed several RV parks just on my drive today, and they seem to run a full gambit here. One was obviously new. They had lots of new trees in there. They were all palm trees, but it was very sparse from what I saw as I drove by, as far as amenities were concerned. Another one that I saw looked like a much more seasoned property. The plantings were nicer. The trees were much larger. What do you see as far as amenities? What do you see being important in the RV parks? What are you offering? What differentiates your park from somebody else's? How's that marketing work?
When you control for location, you got to have good Wi-Fi. I mean, that is one of the most low-hanging fruit opportunities out there. One of the first things we do when we look at parks is look at the comments, the reviews, and see what all the negative reviews are. A lot of them have to do with Wi-Fi. A lot of them have to do with the basic infrastructure. So, you got 35-foot Class A units running double HVAC systems and full-size refrigerators and ice machines and whatever else they got going on. The infrastructure needs to catch up to some of the RVs that are being built there. So it's really just like the basic infrastructure and the Wi-Fi. Pools are nice. You see everything. The smaller one that we have down there in Townsend, it's a very blue collar park. It was built in the late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Our sites are a little tighter just because that's just when they were built. This thing was built before things had 3 slide outs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in a fantastic
Yeah.
jumping off location to Smoky Mountain National Park, and that makes up for a lot of it. So, clean cells, it's some of that very basic stuff. Nice clean bathrooms, good Wi-Fi, friendly people goes a long way. It's
Simple.
Do you do any on-site laundry service, on-site grocery service, anything like that?
Yeah, usually some kind of on-site coin laundry is pretty common. You can pick up a few bucks there. It's also just a nice amenity, so people don't have to go off property to do laundry. We've put in small camp stores for basic sundries. You stay away from stuff that has a short expiration date. We don't do food or anything. So it's just that kind of providing the convenience type thing. But yeah, some of the KOAs are going very heavy. They have a big they have like a convenience store basically at their place. So it really does kind of run the gamut. If you're not very close to something that people want to go see anyway, you'll have to up your game on the amenity side, because now they're coming to your park. They're not coming to your area.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Very
Makes
good.
sense. Yeah, we're a stone's throw from Yellowstone here, so there's lots of RV parks, and I mean we're kind of like at the crossroads between go right to get to Jackson, go left to go to Yellowstone. So we tend to have a lot here, and I think you make a good distinction. If it's a jumping off place, it's kind of like a lot of hotels where you just need a place to sleep. If it's not a jumping off place, you want the hotel that has all the amenities.
Well, and if you choose to operate in a more rural area, you also have to think about, if I'm building a resort here, who's going to run it? Do you have a labor pool to pull from that's close by, or are you going to have to rely on camp workers and seasonal stuff? So there's a lot of things to take into consideration, and ultimately it's a hospitality business. You live and die by your reviews. So it's much different than the apartment space. People are coming in, they want to see a bright, happy face and somebody that is informative about what's going on local attractions wise. I mean, you are absolutely in the hospitality business.
Changing topics, back to multifamily investing. I got the impression that you have 2 partners, your wife and somebody else. But it sounds like you're partnered in some other deals. So it sounds like you've got some experience with partners. How have you found your partners? Obviously, your wife was easy to find. But then how did you vet your partner? Because obviously, if you've never done a deal with somebody, you don't know them. After you've done a couple of deals, it's so much easier. But if you don't know them yet, how'd you vet your partners?
I mean, frankly, our main third partner, we met through our education platform. I did not formally vet him in any way. I don't believe he did us in any way. It became just a very organic relationship. We had complementary skill sets. We get along as friends, and we can also do business together. So that's really nice. I mean, you can go for a hike and not talk about business, or you can go for a hike and try and figure out how to solve some problem. Yeah, we have had some joint ventures and syndications, and there have been a couple of partnerships that didn't go as well as we would have liked, and we had to break up with a couple of people. So we do take vetting people a little more seriously than we used to. It's become more of a checklist items, but even, frankly, to this day, we don't do like a formal background check or anything like that. It's more of a word of mouth. You can find out a whole lot about people just on social media, not only about maybe what they're doing business wise, but, I need to get along with this person for years. Are we going to match up in a very basic way? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have to be best friends. We do have to do business together, but
Yeah. I got into my first partnership in a very similar way. It was through the coaching program that I was in, and it was, you start collaborating. And I mean, a lot of people use the dating to marriage, scenario. But yeah, we started collaborating on things. We started talking first, and we started, you know, hey, I'll show you my underwriting if you show me yours type thing, and but yeah, eventually it got into where we were working well together and decided that we wanted to start doing deals and more deals. Now, of course, with the dating one, we ended up getting a divorce later, but that's I wouldn't say the partnership didn't I wouldn't say that it did not go well, if that makes sense, right? We ended up having different trajectories is all. So I would say when you look at that, I mean, what Greg said is absolutely true. You have to fundamentally, like the other person and be on the same page and, want to spend time with them. The way I like to verbalize that, I got from, a book that's, right to my side is you look at core values, make sure your core values are aligned. And if your core values are aligned, a lot of the other things are going to take care of themselves, as long as you guys have the same value system and the same priorities, you're going to get along. You're going to want to operate things to the best possible. You're going to listen to each other, take feedback, and do the best thing for the business and the investors. So
yeah, and like Michael J, Brian, you put on these great networking calls. All of those are great opportunities just to interact with people and just figure out their vibe. It's like,
yeah.
I feel like I know people from calls and networking a little bit more than I probably would, and from just less personal interactions. So anytime you can network in person with people and have conversations, I'm all about that.
Yeah. And speaking of that networking call that we have, we've actually had several people form partnerships from that call as well.
Yeah.
So you start showing up, you meet somebody,
Yeah,
and
I'm one of them, by the way.
oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is what I've seen with this particular call, this weekly Friday networking call. You'll have people that show up and they're consistently there for 2 or 3 months in a row, and then they disappear. All right. And you don't see them again for a while. In most cases, when they disappear, it's because they've found what they've needed. They come to the networking event looking for something, and they found what they needed. And so they don't need to keep on going to the networking events. Right. So we've had several hundred people. Last time I actually sat down and counted the email addresses and people that have come through there. We've had like 500 or 600 people that have filtered through that meetup, but probably at least a dozen people that I know of that have formed partnerships from there. But anyway, shameless plug. If you don't know about my Friday meetup, for everybody listening, I've got a Friday meetup that is awesome. So speaking of shameless plugs, it's about time for us to wrap things up. And so I'm going to give you guys one last opportunity for a shameless plug. So, Greg, first question going to you is, how can listeners learn more about you?
Really, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn currently. We're kind of in transition mode for our landing page, for lack of better purposes, for our official business organization. So yeah, Greg Scully on LinkedIn. My shameless plug goes back to what I talked about in the beginning, is looking for co-sponsoring opportunities on larger syndication size deals, strong background in asset management, property management, and acquisition and due diligence. Just, I feel like it's all of it, but it really has been all of it for a while now.
Yep. Awesome. And Michael J, how can listeners learn more about you?
I'm going to say LinkedIn also. I'm the only Michael-Jay Freer on LinkedIn, so I'm easier to find. Last name is Freer, so I'm easy to find.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, as far as a plug, I haven't done my first deal yet, but I am very interested in finding people who want to partner in the South Florida area. I think there are several key areas down here that David Lindell would call emerging markets. And I'd like to try and take advantage of those.
Nice. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks guys for coming on the show. Very much appreciate your time. And that's a wrap for today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call the Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.